Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, April 1st. Just kidding. It's Friday, April 1st. We are joined by our all-star panel of top local journalists, Jun Starkey from the Santa Barbara Independent, Josh Molina, the Joe Rogan of Santa Barbara and the Ace Barbecue Reviewer, and Nick Welsh, executive editor of the Independent. Thank you all for being here. So let me just talk quickly about COVID. The in-person meetings of boards and commissions have returned. So that's, I guess, a good step. However, there were still 144 cases this week, 3 deaths. And, that BA2 variant is still out there.
I heard from Gene Yamamura that there were 132 cases yesterday.
Well, there you are. So
that is a big uptick.
That's our big post spring break spike that's maybe coming.
I think we need to impose martial law.
But good news for geezers. I name no names. The second booster has been approved for the Pfizer and Moderna's, and we're breathlessly awaiting word when it gets here. So still COVID maybe not on the upswing. It's okay. All right. So this week we had Christy Lozano. Yes.
Lozano.
Easy for you to say.
Candidate for county school superintendent, who is actually not certified to be a school superintendent, who was not sued directly, but a suit was filed to try to keep her off the ballot. June, you covered that. What's the story there?
So the woman who filed the lawsuit, Molly Culver, her point was that Christy does not have the administrative services credential, which is just a credential that people get after doing so many years of administrative services, and if they are currently serving in an administrative position. She had a certificate of eligibility, which means she, completed about 90% of the requirements to get the certification. Sorry, but she didn't complete it all the way. Sorry, my cat keeps meowing. So she just didn't complete it all the way. And Molly's contention was that because she hadn't fully completed it, she didn't have the qualifications to be superintendent of schools, and therefore she should be taken off the ballot. Obviously, the judge didn't feel that way. She felt that it was kind of splitting hairs if someone completed 90% of the job or that they needed to get done to get the eligibility. And part of the credential issue that came up, it was like, I think Nick kind of said it really well in his column about the situation, that it was like this very circular idea of she doesn't serve in an administrative position, or she hasn't had that experience, but if she were elected, then she would have that experience. So she would somehow get that credential. That was what the judge and her lawyer, John Tyne, seemed to believe could happen. There was
John
also
Tyne the third.
John Tyne the third. Sorry, I always forget about 1 and 2.
Yeah. So Nick, we talked a little bit about why Molly Culver, the ace Democratic consultant who likes to stay below the radar, was the one who put her name as the plaintiff on this suit. And you reported out kind of a shaggy dog story about the connections there. Talk about that, Colin.
Yeah, Molly Culver is a political consultant who has had many clients, usually on the Democratic side of the aisle. And she's done lots of bond measures for educational fund, educational bond measures. And of course, she's done cannabis. And so she's quite well known and has sort of disappeared in the last couple of years. So it was a surprise to see her. She is extremely tight with Jack O'Connell. She started off her career working for Jack. Jack O'Connell, for people who forgot, used to represent us here in Santa Barbara in the State Assembly, State Senate, and then later went on to be State Superintendent of Public Instruction. So he is a very big wheel in educational circles. The law firm that represented her also happens to represent the State Association of county school superintendents. And they are looking at this race, and I am told there have been 3 other races where people who don't quite meet the minimum requirement of credentials in order to run have run for this office. And so they are, and I don't know, it's a little premature for me to say if they are all part of sort of a conservative backlash, or if it's the sort of the conservative right, disaffected cultural warriors of the conservative right. Are they targeting this statewide? I think it's too soon to make that case.
Yeah.
But
The other interesting thing you noted was that Susan Salcido, who is the incumbent superintendent who's being challenged by Christie, is on the board of this superintendent organization.
yeah, well, there's, this represents 58 school superintendents throughout here. There's 58 counties. And if you look at the board, if you go on their website, probably half of them sit on the board. So, there's lots of different, committees, et cetera, and she's on one of them.
All right. And Josh, Christie is a familiar figure at the school board. And to talk about what her platform is as she's challenging Susan Salcido.
Well, she's a conservative who posted a video on YouTube that got 13,000 views, where she talked about what she sees as inappropriate curriculum that Santa Barbara Unified teachers have to use in schools related to critical race theory and other types of diversity and cultural proficiency training. So she talked about this, and then she went sort of viral, got an interview with Fox News, and became sort of the heroine of the local conservatives who are constantly scratching and clawing to try to get more conservatives in power locally. And she's sort of the one that they're trying to prop up right now as having a chance to win this seat. It's interesting. They say that a candidate is never more popular than after they beat a recall effort. And I think that Molly Culver's effort here probably backfired a bit, and it ended up giving Christie a legitimate platform to say that, hey, I'm qualified and I beat this. A lot more attention than she would have gotten, a lot more big photos, long stories, multiple days of coverage for her. And that's all good for her. And I think that she now has a victory of sorts. And Molly Culver and everyone who tried to take her out before the vote looks kind of foolish. I think that.
Well, let me jump in. I mean, if you listen to the judge, I think you're right. That's certainly how it's going to be spun. And, I read all the legal papers, and I'm not a judge and I don't play one on TV, but if I was a judge, I could have ruled either way on this one. And Colleen Stern, the judge in the case, made a point to say that the argument and the claim brought against Christie Lozano was not frivolous or just a cheap shot, that there was a basis to it. She ultimately ruled the other way, kind of let the people decide. And I think that was the correct choice.
That's what judges normally do. Yeah, but to Josh's point, for example, I was communicating with her last night about a piece that I posted today, and she said Molly Culver is trying to undermine democracy. So it's really she's something she's using. In June, I think you were the first one to interview her, and she had some interesting quotes in your piece, which turned out to be very identical, basically, to what Mike Stoker had said. Was she, when you spoke with her, was she like just speaking off the cuff, or Did you get the sense she was reading from a statement or what?
That was a statement that I was quoting.
Okay, so she gave,
Yeah, and it did strike me that it was word for word what Mike Stoker had said, which is, the Mad Libs of take, the county and put in schools, like it was very, very odd. And I do remember having like a conversation with other journalists that was very much like, do they like write this together? Like, do they have a big conservative meeting where they all kind of like write their speeches? It was very weird that it was so similar.
yeah, it was very weird. And
But Jerry,
Mike says
you,
no, he barely knows her, and he wrote his own stuff. And
but Jerry, what I was struck by, you had a really nice piece there, kind of looking at the whole plagiarism issue. Now, in one of the really neat tricks in Christy Lozano's legal filings, was she was comparing herself to Joe Biden, a candidate I'm sure she hated. But she was saying when Joe Biden first ran for Senate, he was 29 years old and not eligible to serve, but because he wouldn't be sworn in until his 30th birthday, he could run. Well, the other thing about Joe Biden is that he was charged with plagiarism many times in his career. So this may be another instance where the Joe Biden wrinkle comes back to haunt her.
yeah, that is true. He had to leave the 1988 race because of plagiarism. And one of the things he quoted a thing from Robert F. Kennedy, and my old partner at CalBuzz, Phil Traunstein, was working for the San Jose Mercury News, and he's the one that called him out on it at the state Democratic convention. That's how old I am, Josh. All right, enough on Christy.
I'll be on Wikipedia as soon as this video is over.
So we have this project on Garden Street that I guess passed muster with the Historic Landmarks Commission this week, but it's kind of weird. It's a keyless hotel, and the neighbors are all kind of scratching their heads or worse, saying, "What is this all about?" So what is this all about?
Well, it's a commercial office building right now, 12 offices, and it's going to become a hotel without a front desk, without a concierge. You don't check in and get a key and go to your room. That's all handled digitally through your smartphone and through your registration. And so it's a way to have a hotel in an existing building and not have to go through discretionary land use review. This property owner could have built up to or proposed up to 48 feet, chose not to because they didn't want to go through that. And I think one of the initial proposals or conversations with city staff was, if you do something like that, it's going to trigger this. And the response was, okay, let's not do that, because everybody knows that he may ultimately get approval, but it's going to cost a lot more money and time. So the law is such that if you're not changing the use and hotels are allowed in this zone, then you can build a hotel. They weren't adding any height to it. They were just making some exterior, some lighting, some trees, putting in an elevator. No review. It only went to consent calendar. And as we know, consent calendar items are considered routine. They're not recorded. They're not videoed. They're not put on YouTube. And they're really what staff determines not important enough to discuss. And who loses? The public. And in this case, the seniors who live at Laguna Cottages next door were very upset because they had no platform to be able to say, we don't want a hotel with 22 spaces that's going to have 30 rooms. How is that going to work? We don't want that near us. There's going to be noise and trash and pickup and all of these sort of things. We don't have any opportunity to weigh in. And so they sent letters. Some of them spoke at the council meetings. And this thing, there's nothing like
Is it gonna,
unseemly.
is there ever gonna be a forum where they can register their unhappiness with it?
No, they would try to speak at the ABR meetings. There were 3 meetings, the 2nd, the 17th, or the 24th, and then on Wednesday, the 31st, it was given final approval. And so it's kind of a done deal.
It'd be appealed to the city council?
I don't think so, because it's on what grounds? It's just like
Parking?
Chick-fil-A. It's just like Target was with the former Z Galleria. It was like, oh, Target's gonna go into this mostly empty building. Remember, people were freaking out about traffic and parking. Well, they have the right to go in there because it was retail and that's an area for retail. Chick-fil-A, they didn't go in there trying to change the whole building. It's another fast food restaurant. So it doesn't trigger these broader conversations about review. And I think that that's a bigger issue the city's going to have to talk about. The city council and planning commission are going to be having a joint meeting coming up soon in April. And I think they're going to be talking about how do we either incentivize people to build housing. The big picture, of course, is
Yeah, I mean, that's the bad look to me. I mean, that's all we're talking about is building housing, and now all of a sudden I got 33 more hotel rooms, which is essentially Airbnb. It sounds like to me.
yeah, this would be an opportunity. Developers don't want to go through the hassle. But if we need housing, that would have been a spot to put housing in. Obviously, probably those residents would have complained about a big housing project too. But at least in that context, we could say there's a community need for it.
Right, it would have aligned with what the city's actually trying to do. Okay, yeah, interesting story though. June, the school board has received several school boards, actually. Santa Barbara Unified, I think you reported Hope, and Carpinteria as well. A new mandate from the state to provide transitional kindergarten, which is apparently not cheap, and nobody seems to know where the money's coming from. What is transitional kindergarten, and what are the districts going to do about the money?
Right now, there are a couple people, including Virginia Alvarez and Dr. Ann Hubbard from the Hope School District. They're working with Monique Limon. I think she's drafted a letter and she sent it to other senators, basically asking them to provide more money for districts like Santa Barbara that are community funded and rely heavily on property taxes. Because most other districts in California that aren't community funded got a large financial sum from the state and were able to cover the cost. Because for people like, so when you have school for 4-year-olds, you have to provide facilities for them, and most regular bathrooms are too big. They need to build entirely new bathrooms for them. They have to have more accessible walkways. There has to be facility updates, and there I think are at least a few schools in Santa Barbara that don't have that. So that's where the money would need to go. And then obviously part of that mandate is they now require more teachers or teachers' aides to students. It's now one teacher to every 12 students, and most classrooms are bigger than 12, so they'll need to start hiring more people, and that's obviously been an issue for America and California especially. So this money's really desperately needed right now.
Yeah, I as I recall, it's $1.5 million. Is that for all of the districts, or is that just Santa Barbara?
And that's just Santa Barbara, I think.
Wow, state mandates, we love them.
That's
All right.
not cheap.
Speaking of people that are trying to get a mandate, the Civilian Review Commission, the Formation Commission on Commissions, had a meeting with finally Acting Chief Barney Malekian, and he was pretty straightforward about his objections to what the draft plan is. What's his concern, Nick?
Well, it's a lot of what we've heard before. I mean, what the chief said is, I like police oversight. I want a police oversight commission. I support it. The department supports it. It's good for building trust in the community. It's good for accountability. It gives me a platform for when there's a totally hot button incident in the community that would allow me to directly communicate what's going on, and it's a place where the community can weigh in with its concerns. But what he didn't like was the proposal that is on the table right now. The first reason he cited was because no former law enforcement officials and in some cases relatives of former law enforcement officials would not be considered eligible for membership, while at the same time, people who had lived experience with homelessness or lived experience in the criminal justice system would. And he had a line in there saying, you know, this is very disheartening to us, you know, and the department, and it makes us feel that not all lived experience is treated equally.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great point that he made, because lived experience is a phrase that we hear over and over again in these debates. And, you know, to say, well, what about the lived experience of cops? I thought was a very smart and powerful objection. So what's going to happen?
So there was supposed to be a meeting last night of the Formation Commission. It didn't happen because some of the documents that they needed were not made available in a timely way. Those documents had to deal with, they did a survey, online survey of the community in terms of what they wanted, and then they had the results from various stakeholder meetings that they've been involved in. And, you know, they have done a lot. You know, some of the commissioners talked about, they did coffees with a commissioner, which is sort of their spin on coffees with a cop. And what they did is that they met, two of them, I think, met individually with a lot of the police officers in the department, certainly with the union. And the results of all of this public outreach in terms of what does the public want was not available. So what they want to do is weigh the public out, what the public says, with what they already wanted to do, and to see if they needed to make any changes.
Yeah. And Josh, the cost of this is currently is estimated to be $600,000. Is that going to fly with the city council?
Probably, but I think they're going to have a big debate about whether there should be law enforcement represented on the commission. From the beginning, this thing was going to be complicated and very vexing to all the decision makers. So I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
And I'm hearing even from, you know, the more liberal council members that they're all sort of struggling with sticker shock.
Yeah.
You know, it has two, it's a hybrid, so it's a board and then it's a new office, and it's a new office with an executive director and an ombudsperson. And that's a little bit more than I think a lot of people had bargained for. And I think there's definitely gonna be some whittling down.
Yeah.
If it's gonna get approved.
All right. And Josh, do we know where healing justice is on the commission issue by any chance?
Well, I haven't been covering those meetings, so I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
All right, but you do know Gabe Escovedo, the chair of that commission, planning commissioner, who was running for assembly, dropped out when Greg Hart got in. What have you heard about him being drafted to run for school board against Cape Ford?
I haven't heard anything about that. I think I have not talked to Gabe since I wrote the story about how he quit in a race he probably shouldn't have started in. So I don't know, Jerry, but it sounds like a good way to start some drama.
Yeah.
Gabe's a pretty smart guy. Why would he take on Cape Ford? I mean, isn't Cape Ford?
I think
Because the district is the east side and the west side.
But Jerry, what I had heard is that they were trying to entice him to step aside from the race against Greg Hart by offering him, you know, a school board. But if he ran because of the districts, he would find himself running against Cape Ford, who is probably the most formidable school board member there is right there. And that would be like going from the frying pan to the fire in terms of running against an impossible opponent. So not much of an offer.
I don't know. I seems to me, I mean, I haven't studied the districts in great depth, but just looking at the neighborhoods, I think, I mean, that's one of the Latino districts. And
is there a problem with Cape Ford? I mean, like Nick said, she fires on all cylinders and she knows the issues, and whether you agree or disagree with her, she's exactly the kind of person you want on a school board. So I think
But the
it's
whole point
bothersome.
of district elections was to increase minority representation, and that is a district that is majority minority, and it just, it's kind of an
Well, she'd be the
outlier.
work. She would not be the one I would think that should feel the impact of district elections if we're trying to get minority representation, because she's good. I mean, she knows her stuff.
She is really good. All right. And then council also approved a bunch of money for the public library. What's that project, Josh?
Okay, so they approved, I think it was $10.9 million on the library sort of a renovation of the Library Plaza area. So this has been a project that's been in the works a long time. The Library Foundation Board has raised about $5 million. They're taking Measure C to fund the rest, some reserves. And it's a way to transform that area, which is kind of an island, into a community hub, a community square, someplace where you can have outdoor arts events, you can have festivals, and it'll be an attraction for people to come downtown and be sort of an extension of the library, the museum, and be sort of a community hub. Right now, it's been chained off. It's like the old Korea Hotel, was a big hole in the wall. It's been sort of just like neglected and nothing. So I think the plan is to make it into something. Obviously, there's a lot of homelessness in that area and who have traditionally used that area. That's one of the reasons why it's chained off. So it's going to disrupt that vibe. But this was a big deal for the library people and the fundraisers and everybody who wants to see more potential out of that space.
So, Nick, I mean, it is a gathering place for homeless people. Homeless people go inside the library and read and use the facilities and so on. Do you know enough about this project that have they accounted for that likelihood of that happening, or what? How does this all fit together?
I know what the library has traditionally and always, as long as I've been here, has been sort of trying to figure out how do we make the library open and inviting to everybody. But then some people are very uncomfortable because of just the presence of so many homeless people who seek refuge there. I mean, it's a place for so many people to seek refuge. And, some of them have mental health issues and some of them have behavior issues. And over the years, there have been issues, amongst library staff that they didn't feel safe or they were being forced to act as security. And two things have happened. One is there's a lot more of a security presence at the library. The library has been sort of cleaned out of a lot of the books. And so there aren't places for people to go hide. But the other thing that's really interesting is that the library in the last year or so has really kind of gotten involved in efforts to get services to the homeless. I went to a event this week at the rescue mission, and there was all these different service providers there, one of whom was the library, and they had the biggest line of homeless people at their table, because what they were helping people do was how do you find your birth certificate? How do you get your social security certificate? So if you're trying to get services for people, they need these forms of documentation. And the library is now affirmatively going out and reaching. They have a band that they take out to the various homeless, neighborhood navigation centers is what they call it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so the library is definitely stepping up its outreach.
And the library is also forgiving late fees, June, as I think I read in your story. Is this all of a piece that they're doing, or what's the deal with the late fees?
They're switching to a new online catalog system. So they're trying to just forgive all outstanding debts. Obviously, if you've never returned a book or you've lost an item, they won't forgive that. But yeah, any late fees you've accrued from just turning something in too late after a few months, but as long as you turn it in, the fees will be forgiven.
Yeah, New York just did this, an interesting piece in the New York Times today. They've gotten back almost 100,000 books, and some of them are like, people have had them out for 50 years and
I have one of those.
writing, apologetic notes about what's going on. All right, I do want to point out, we talked last week, Josh, about the State Street underpass and architect Jeff Shelton's vision for that with a lot of columns. And I asked the question, where was Sheila Lodge on this? And of course, heard from her, and she is very excited about it and loves it, and wants us to know that the inspiration from it is the Palau de la Música in Barcelona, which, Nick, I'm sure you probably already knew that.
But you know what, I should have, it was a bit of a cheap shot on Sheila, as if Sheila is like the big party pooper of Santa Barbara.
No, that wasn't. She is my lodestar in terms of balancing all of the issues that you need to build anything bigger than a doghouse in this town. So that's why I raised it. I didn't raise it because she was a party pooper. All right, June, what are you working on for next time?
Housing is never going to leave. So I've always got work. It's great.
Josh, who you got on a podcast?
We didn't talk about my John Davies interview, Jerry.
Well,
He speaks highly of you.
Go ahead, talk about it.
Well, rather than interviewing all of the conservative candidates on the ballot, I thought I would just interview John Davies and let him talk about all of them. So we went down memory lane. He's a big fan of Nick, Jerry. He knows the old guard, and he's talking a lot about conservative power, why there's none of it. He speaks pretty candidly and frankly about it. He says it's an 18-point deficit, and then he defended Barrett Reed quite vigorously, and how he was treated during the campaign. So it's a good one. But upcoming next week, Jerry, you're going to love this. None other than the hardest working breaking news reporter, fire reporter, car crash reporter, Mr. Scanner, Tom Bolton.
I'm
will be a
Bolton.
guest on my show, and I'm going to talk to him about how he covers all this stuff at all hours of the night.
He sleeps with the scanner. I mean, it's crazy. It's astonishing the amount of stuff that he
So
generates.
Josh, did John Davies have any explanation as to why nobody is running for office anymore? I mean, we're
Yes.
about to be in a situation where we have 3 county supervisors who ran unopposed.
Yeah, he blamed the Democrats. He said that the Democrats want to attack conservative candidates personally. He used Barrett Reed as an example. And he said, why would any conservative want to run facing a registration disadvantage, knowing that Democrats are going to attack them personally? So he whined a little bit. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. Republicans, they don't organize very well, and they don't do anything to start the next generation. But he did say that, Barrett Reed, Christy Lozano, these are personal attacks on these conservatives. So
They used
was
to
what-
have Republicans like Dan Secord or Brooks Firestone, who were, very, moderate. They were both pro-choice.
And then came Michael Huffington.
he was
Yeah, no-
pro-choice too.
Note to the Republicans and the conservatives, like, you're not going to win a county seat or any seat if you're anti-vaxxer, if you're not pro-choice, if you're going to criticize critical race theory. Like, you're going to speak really well to your small little group, but in Santa Barbara County, that's not how you win. You have to cross over and be likable by everybody. And
So you
don't
don't
seem
think,
to
so
understand that.
Stoker's theory of the case in the assembly race is that he's going to win big in North County, that 70% of the, people say county's headed in the wrong direction. So you don't see any way that that's going to work out. And similarly for Christy Lozano, who I assume is going to be talking largely to North County.
no, I don't. I mean, Nick, I don't know what Nick thinks, but I don't think Christie or Mike are going to be victorious on election day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're both, spitting into a pretty stiff wind. They will do better up in the North County than they do down here. But there's so many voters down here and there's such a gap in party registration.
Turnout, yeah, and party registration. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, June Starkey, Josh Molina, and Nick Welsh for being with us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.